we are here tonight. Thank y'all for watching. We're going to go ahead and get this on the road. So, a friend of mine in the paranormal world introduced me to our guest tonight by the name of Robert. I do apologize. I can't pronounce your last name, sir.
Oh, it's Riggy. It's an Italian
Riggy. Okay,
Riggy.
so he is. We also got Pyrene up the top right. He's a good friend of mine as well. We call him Andrew or Pyrene. He's also an investigator. He's been on my show before as well. So we got Robert tonight as the guest. We appreciate everybody coming in and tuning on. Um, Tell us a little bit about yourself, Robert. What are you into? What brought you here? And
Okay, and we'll go from there. Uh,
yeah,
First of all, thank you, Justin, for having me on. I appreciate that, and also to Mike from Midnight Paranormal Society. Thank you, Mike. And Mike's a very good friend of mine, and so I appreciate him telling you some things about me.
sure.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I'm a psychic medium. I have a master's degree in forensic psychology and clinical social work from the
Okay.
University of Florida. And in 1980, I interviewed Ted Bundy. My first paranormal experience was when I was 4 years old, and it just got stronger and stronger all over these years and stuff like that. The paranormal field is only maybe 5 or 10% of my life.
Right.
Um, I do much more other things. I volunteer all over the country in homeless shelters and soup kitchens and stuff like
Sure.
that, which is very important to me. But everybody wants to hear about Ted Bundy and about
Yeah, that was that
Dennis
was
Rader.
yeah, that was my kind of my selling point. Me
Right.
personally, I'm into not only the paranormal, but I enjoy watching the serial killer documentaries and stuff like that. And when you mentioned you were part of the team or whatever that got to interview Ted Bundy, I'm like, you got to talk about it. We got to bring you on the show. I mean, not only Ted Bundy or what other people that you've interviewed in your lifetime. When we could talk about the paranormal experiences that you had as well. So let's start. How did you get involved, and how were you able to get to
Interview.
that point to interview Ted Bundy,
Okay.
and how did it go?
In 1980, I was working on my master's degree. I had taken 2 extra years of education at the University of Florida, and
Hmm.
that's where I graduated from. And I took 2 years of pre-med. I wanted to know more about the human body and
Sure.
such like that. And so then I went to my advisor and I said, I would like to write to Ted Bundy. He's only 50 miles from the University of Florida. And he goes, if you want to, go for it. And so I wrote to Ted, I wrote to his lawyer, I wrote to the state ward. And 3 weeks later, I received notification or a letter back to Ted and those other two saying, yes, I could come to the prison and so I could interview him. Now, this interview, there was no bars between us,
Really,
nothing.
really.
There was no shields, nothing. He was shackled, of course, to a chair. There were security around him, three gentlemen,
Right.
and so. But let me go back just for a second. Is that I also there was also three female psychologists there also, and also there was another male psychologist. Okay, and so I was in the forensic part of psychology.
Okay.
Another one was like abnormal psychology. Another one was into child psychology, and another person was into animal psychology. So we all come there with different things, right?
Right. Right.
Okay, so my part was Ted Bundy. I wanted to know what got him because he had alluded to several programs about delving into the dark side and whatever that meant because he never went in detail. Okay, anyhow, so we go there and we are taken to this room and we wait about 20 minutes and I could feel being a psychic medium, I could feel the energy changing with inside the room,
Right. Right.
all this evil and stuff like that, right? Anyhow, he walks into the room, he's very charismatic, very, very charismatic. And he looked at the women first. And let me tell you that the women, one of them was very busty, as they say, so she wore a tight sweater, and all this was talked about prior to that was on us that that's what they were going to wear, right?
Right.
She wore a very tight sweater. The next psychologist wore a very nice work suit and such like that. And then the other female psychologist, she wore gym clothes. And for myself and for the other male psychologists, we wore clothes of that time because
Yeah.
everything was Miami Vice, and it was pastels, and it was khakis and boat shoes and all that stuff, right?
Sure.
Anyhow, so we walked in there, and just the energy that I could feel. And when I looked in Ted's eyes, they were dark and they were black. There was nothing there, nothing whatsoever. The first thing that Ted was look at the women. He stuck his tongue out at them. He winked at them and crap like that. We had talked prior to that to not be manipulated by that crap.
Right. Right.
Okay, stuff like that. So I wanted to know everything that I could within these 90 minutes. It was 90 minutes and such like that. And so he sat down and everything. And so we introduced ourselves and such like that. But he kept looking at the women, and so that was fine too. I always had to redirect him back to the question that one of us had and such like that. And so he looked at me and he said, Robert, I know who you are and I know what you do. He didn't know me from Adam and Eve, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because back then there was no Facebook and stuff like that.
He was already starting the psychological warfare on you.
Oh yeah, very much so. And but just being there, he began to sweat, and I saw that and stuff like that. I wanted to see what he got into, but the way he was raised, the way where he was born, how he was reared, how he was raised, it was just like it was just like it's just like one thing, a layer, one thing after another, the betrayal, the hurt, the hatred, and such like that. Okay, so Ted was born in Vermont to Louise Caldwell. Okay,
Okay.
she was an unwed mother, and okay, he was born in 1946. Okay, so when a child was born that time, illegitimately, I can't even say the word tonight.
Illegitimately.
Thank you, thank you. And but anyhow, and so when a child was born, their birth certificate was stamped bastard. So all at once,
Really?
yeah. So in the very
Know that.
beginning, yeah. So then in the very beginning, he was already labeled. Okay. So they lived in Vermont for a while. Then they moved to Philadelphia, where Louise's parents are from. Well, it was strangely enough, his parents adopted Bundy, adopted Ted. Okay. Bundy gets his last name from his mother's this man that his father married, and so it was his stepfather's name, Bundy.
Right.
And so anyhow, and so he wasn't doing well in school. He would peeing like most boys do it outside and stuff, but he would pee in the classroom and all sorts of bizarre things. He began to steal and such like that. They took him to a psychologist, and it nothing helped, nothing worked. And so after several years, they decided to move to the Pacific Northwest. Didn't know anybody there. So Louise thought, why not give Ted a clean slate? So they move out there, but the weird behavior continued and such like that. He was tested, and he was tested in the 136, which is the high range. Okay, of
Very
being
smart.
tested. Oh, very much so, but
Very smart. Yeah.
very manipulative also.
Yeah.
And so the other psychologists were asking him questions such like that, and I redirected him back to me, and I wanted to know what he actually got into and why. Like I said, anyhow, he said that about several years later, in the Seattle area, between Seattle and Spokane, that his cousins came out to visit with him, and so anyhow, his cousins go, do you know who really your mom is? He goes, yeah, it's Louise. It's your Aunt Louise. And his cousin said, well, do you know who else she is to you? And he goes, no. And so his cousins told him that Louise, besides being his mother, was
Right.
his sister. So Louise was his mother, but also his sister. And
Really?
then, yeah. And then the cousin said, do you know who your father is or could be? Ted said, no. He goes, your father could be our grandfather. And so to this day, so he went to the grave, never knowing who his real father was.
So he
Never.
does. Did he ever know who his real mom was at all?
His mom was Louise,
Okay. Okay.
but Louise was also his sister.
How could that? How could that happen?
Okay, Louise was older, like 20 years older, right? Okay, so
Right.
that was his sister. Okay, she gets impregnated by God knows who. Okay, she has Ted, so she becomes his mother.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So how deep in the conversation when you were there with him did you go did you find out what at all made him do the things that he did
Yes.
as an adult later in life?
Yes. Well, it started out as a teenager. What he got, so what he got into was the Ouija board. He was very open about that. Very, very open about that. He also talked about killing little animals, chipmunks, squirrels, birds,
I was just
Right.
stuff.
about to ask if you got into that level of stuff too.
Yes, he did. And he said, and I said, "What did you do with them?" And he goes, "Well, I would put them on the Ouija board. A lot of times he was drunk, he was high, and whatever, as a teenager and such.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, he just he would summon demons. Now, my paranormal brothers and sisters, just because you deal with a Ouija board doesn't mean that you're going to be a serial killer. No way. But he had the pathology already. There's something called nurture or nature, and unfortunately, he was like the perfect storm for that because of all the betrayal and the lies and such like that from his family and how he found out and such like that. He began to have a deep-seated hatred towards women, very much.
It normally happens like that, isn't it? When they get to that stage, there's something happened in their lifetime that they have this hate towards particularly women.
Oh, very much so. And, especially during the adolescent years,
Yeah.
puberty and such
Yeah.
like testosterone running wild and stuff. And so his friends would come over with the Ouija boards and stuff like that. And they would gather these animals and they would torture them and all sorts of things, put them on the Ouija board. They would summon these demons and such like that. Well, eventually Ted got so involved in that, as he was telling me, that his friends left him alone. So he became a loner. Again, he's very charismatic. He's very narcissistic,
Yeah,
and
you
most
you would
serial
think he would
killers.
be.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I said you think he would be narcissistic like that with and how can I put it? Um, someone's
The
persona like he
the
is, I guess.
character traits that
There,
he
yeah.
had were very much what you would consider atypical serial killer mentality.
Oh, very much so. Yes, very
When
much
when
so.
did he figure out, or did you ever find out when you were talking with him? When did he figure out how he was when he started killings other than the animals? What made him get to that point of wanting to take someone's life?
He got to the point where the hatred overcame him. That he needed to get that pain out.
Right.
He wanted to make his mother feel all this pain, anguish. At one time, he slapped the hell out of his mother,
Damn.
called her a fucking bitch.
Yeah.
Was
Okay.
she ever
So,
abusive to him at
so for
all?
the ones watching, this is an
Oh,
adult show. If
I'm
not to
sorry.
interrupt you, it's okay, no problem. Not to interrupt the guests or anybody, but if the ones watching this is an adult show. If you have little ones around, please make them go somewhere else. They don't need to be hearing this. We do
Please.
curse on here. We do talk about things like this on here. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the viewers. Go
Okay.
ahead and continue, Robert.
Okay. And so one time he did go in and slap his mother's sister. And so when he would said that to me, you could see the anger in his eyes. He couldn't move his hands too much like I'm doing, but because they were shackled. But this effect that you could see the anger and the frustration really, really come out. And what I saw psychically was him sweating. Now the other psychologists never saw that, right?
Right.
When when I was asking him, I said, "How did you learn to decapitate and dissect, disembowel?"
Yeah, because
And
that's on a doctor's level doing something like that.
well, and also I asked him, why did you go to school to become a psychologist? And he said, "Robert, I wanted to be a psychologist like you because I wanted to know how to manipulate people more."
He wanted to use that psychology degree on a lesser level of not helping people. I guess that's the way to put
Helping
it.
himself. Hell,
Yeah,
right. So, excuse me. So helping himself. Anyhow, he said, "Robert, do you know who Ed Gein is? Do you guys
that
know who Ed?"
sounds familiar.
Okay, Ed Gein was a guy was a serial killer also,
Yep.
and he loosely his life was based on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yep.
Okay, He would skin people. He would use their bones and such, right? That he had a great admiration for him, for Ed, and so that's what he told me, and stuff like that. And so he said the day that he decided to kill someone, he thought about it. He was thinking how he would do it, but he said he started to hear these voices. Do I believe he was psychotic? Yes. Do I believe that he was sociopathic? Yes. Do I believe it's narcissistic? Yes, I do. Do I believe maybe at times that he was even possessed? Maybe. Could be. Okay,
Okay,
because
so
he
when it comes to someone like hearing the voices in their head, right? Us normal quote normal people, we don't hear these voices. But where do you, as a psychologist or with a doctor in that in that field, do you guys have any explanation from how that could take place?
yes, sometimes when people hear voices, it can be because they have fractured their personality, as they say, in layman's terms. Okay.
What
Um,
about something like schizophrenia?
Yeah, it is. Well, it could be schizophrenia, it could be schizoid, it could be paranormal schizophrenia. And so with him, he was hearing these voices. Were these voices of maybe Ed Gein? Were they voices of a demon? Were they because he was paranoid schizophrenic? He was psychotic. Could be. It could be a number of things. Okay. So he heard these voices, but the bottom line to all this is that he wanted to get back at his mother. He wanted to get back at all females. He wanted them to feel the same pain, the betrayal, and the lies that were perpetrated upon him.
So
That's how
did
he
did
did.
he? I mean, of course, he got abused in some sort of way, right? But was the most of
Oh,
it from his mom?
no, he was never sexually abused. He
No,
was never physically abused. No. But
really.
going
Really?
that
Wow.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said really well. I tried to ask that question beforehand, so thanks, Dustin, for asking it again. Usually, when I've done research on serial killers and stuff like that, their trauma in the past is stemmed from usually a physical
Yeah,
side,
yeah.
Right,
as well as the emotional side.
right. But with Ted, no.
Wow.
He
Really?
never. And so I even asked him, "Were you sexually abused by anyone?" He said, "Hell no, not at all, none whatsoever,
Now, when he
none."
responded like that, because you're a psychologist, right, with a degree in that, right? You're very smart to get that. Could you see like the facial expressions or the body language when he was responding to those questions? Could you tell that he was lying?
There were sometimes, body language. That's one thing that we learn right away, where you learn to read body language and such like
Right,
that. So I was looking at how many times he was blinking. I was looking how he was fidgeting, if he was fidgeting. I was looking how he swallowed and things like that. And being a psychic medium, I felt that everything that he was telling me was correct because it began to add up. You know what I mean? So it was nurture and nature. It's the same thing, same time. Do I believe that he was very manipulative? Of course I do, because that's how he got his victim. That's how he
right.
got his victim. And so he said just one afternoon, he went for a ride. He said something had told me, as he said to me, that I am going to get my revenge. And so he had all the tools of the trade, let's say, right?
Right.
Anyhow, and a lot of his MO, where the pathology was just the fact that that he would like pull over, and he would put the hood up. A lot of women and men too. If men stopped to see if they needed any help, he would say no. But if a woman stopped, unfortunately, that became one of his victims and such like that.
So
And
everything was pure randomness. I mean, all the killings that he did, right? I've seen, like
right,
everybody else has been, we have all seen the documentaries and stuff like that. So everything was never planned out. It was never, what's the word
no,
I'm looking for?
yeah,
Premeditated. It was just pure randomness.
right. Except for the fact that all the women that he killed, murdered, heinously, decapitated, and there was 12 of them, and I asked him about that also, that all of them, except for the 12-year-old girl that he murdered and cannibalized her,
Wow.
uh, looked like his mother. Most of them looked like
Really?
his her. Yes, very much so. Because he wanted to get that revenge out for on her, and he didn't want to kill her. And I asked her about that. I said, "Well, why don't you just kill your mom?" And he goes, "Would you kill your mom?" And I said, "No, what the hell?" And then I said, "Don't turn the tables on me. I'm here to ask you. You're the one who said we could interview you with with no stipulations that you were going to talk about whatever, right?"
Right.
And so a lot of times he tried to make himself a victim. Oh, because my mother lied to me. That's not only my mother, she was my sister, you know? And then one time he looked over to the women and said, "Do you know that I've been raped here?" And I said, "Stop." I said, "If you think that you're going to tell us you were raped, okay, and then how you murdered these innocent women, decapitated them, cannibalized them, and everything else, you want us to, you want us to be sympathetic to you? You're fucking nuts." And I
Yeah,
said
why
that
would
to
you
her.
have any sympathy towards somebody like that? He I know he killed what, like 20 or 30 of them if I'm not mistaken, wasn't it?
Well, he confessed. Well, he told us it was over. It was over 100.
Holy
Over
shit.
100. Over 100. And you know what? I truly believe what I'm sensing and feeling at that time, and even today, that it was more than 150 people, women that he killed. And that's a God's truth. Because the narcissistic part of a person will say, okay, you can rob this store and you'll get away with it, right?
Right.
Okay, so it becomes easier and easier and easier. But on the other hand, the narcissistic part of a person will kick you in the ass at the very end because you get sloppy. You get very, very sloppy, and you do. Okay. And also, Ted Bundy, and I was thinking about the Green River, uh, Gary Ridgway, right? And I
Right.
asked him that. And I said, I know that you had somewhat had something to do with him being turned in, being caught. And he said, yeah. He said, the reason why I wrote to the authorities, because I wanted them to know how to catch him because he was getting all the best stock.
He was getting jealous
Yeah, he
because this
was.
other
He
guy
took
was
out the
getting.
competition.
Yeah, he
So
was.
I don't mean to chuckle or nothing like that, but it's
But
just
it's true though, Dustin. It is true. And how he used the word stock really bothered the women who were in that room with me and such like that, right? Because he had no regard for females at all. When I was raised, my father always said, "You never lay a hand on a woman.
never. Same thing
Never,
here. Never.
never. If somebody makes you
Ditto.
so damn mad, if somebody makes you so damn mad, you walk away. You walk away.
Yeah.
Look at later, right?" But anyhow, so and the way he talked about talked about talked about the Ouija board, talked about how he was so articulate about talking about how he murdered these animals, and he wanted to see in their eyes the pain that they were going through. Okay, and that's how he killed these women, these innocent women. And my brothers and sisters who are listening to this, during that time, people were hitchhiking all over. It was a
Everywhere.
thing to
Yeah.
do. It was a thing to do. People were going to the Pacific Northwest. Okay, they were going to Northern California to the Monterey Pop Festival and things like that. And when he began his heinous life and murdering these women, that was just right after the hippies and such like that, free love and everything. And so he had a lot of, quote, stock out there to choose from. And again, my brothers and sisters, I'm not glorifying what this bastard did because these women's stories need to be told. These were innocent girls, young ladies, okay? They were somebody's sister, somebody's cousin,
A
you know?
family member. They belonged somewhere.
Yes, and these women helped him because they felt sorry for him because during that time it was like helping each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People would stop and pick up hitchhikers right and left, stuff like that, right? It was so common to see hitchhikers, so very very common. And so what he did was he went and he was when he was telling this, it was just it flowed so easily out of him. Was some of it manipulation? Of course. But the way he would go into detail of how he got these women and about him pulling this car over, putting up the hood. Like I said, if a guy stopped by and, he just played them off. But if a woman stopped, and he knew that area very, very well. There was a cabin or shed in this one area that he used quite often. And I remember that he was telling me about that he was on this road, a very, very vacant, not vacant road, but just desolate out in the forest or
In
the
the middle of nowhere, basically. Yeah.
right. Yeah. And so anyhow, so he got out and I said, where did you how tell me what was going through your mind? That's what I was most interested about, right?
Right.
And he said, all the ones I would hear, I would hear someone say to me, pull over now. And so he did. So he pulled over, and then he said that he was very nervous for the first time, but he knew that he could do it. And so he was really overly confident because at any given time, to all of these people that these women that these innocent women that he murdered, that things could have changed.
Yeah.
Somebody else could have stopped behind him, but they didn't, right? Anyhow, so the first time he pulls over, a man stops, like I said, and the woman stops later on, and he's wearing a cast. He's wearing a cast on his arm, but within the cast itself, there's a big butcher knife, right? So anyhow, so this woman sees him, and he has a cast on, such like that, and he can't get the car started. Prior to that, he pulled some wires or whatever, and anyhow, couldn't get it started. And so finally they did, but he said that he needed to go to this shed. He needed to go to this shed, and would she go with him, not follow him, but go with him to this shed where there's more tools and everything, right? And she agreed to it. God bless her soul. She agreed to it. And so they go into the shed. He hits her with his cast and she falls back. He then begins to peel the cast away. Okay. Now imagine you're the woman who was just hit in the head or hit in the
Right.
face. You're bloody, you're scared, you're screaming, you're crying, all these emotions, right? And you see this asshole tearing off his cast, and you see this big butcher knife. And that's what he wanted. He wanted to see the fear on these women's faces. He wanted these women to beg him to stop. Please let me go. He said that was the best part of it, is to hear these women beg for mercy. And in fact, it was him that was begging mercy from his mother about how he was lied to.
See, that's where my question lies because as a psychologist, you know that most of the serial killers, even from past, today, current, whatever, right? Some kind of form of abuse somewhere along the way as a child must have taken place. This is where common sense comes into play. If a child is abused in any way, shape, or form, they're going to take that anger out on the abuser
Right.
later in life, and they're gonna get whatever they need to get out because of that abuser. You're telling me that he said that he was never abused in any way, shape, or form.
He was never abused, but he was emotionally abused. And
Okay.
okay, and so how he processed his abuse was so different than a lot of serial killers who were sexually abused and stuff like that. He was emotionally abused because he felt that he was so betrayed by his mother,
Betrayal.
his sister. So he was betrayed. Okay. And so these lies. And if she would have come to him from the get go and said, "Oh, by the way, Teddy, I'm your sister. I don't know who your father is," or whatever, right? If she would have done some things early on, we would not be talking about this bastard today.
Right, right.
We won't be. So he knocks the hell out of this woman. He gets the butcher knife. He rips her bra off with the knife itself and begin. He's very, very articulate again of what he's talking about. And he said that he like learned from Ed Gein. He learned how to skin animals and such like that. So he began to cut the woman's nipples off. And again, my brothers and sisters, I am not trying to glorify what he did, but I think people need to know how heinous of an asshole he was. Really, truthfully.
Yeah, these women, and even the women that the law has yet to find to this day. They don't even they haven't found, and the stories of these women need to be told.
Oh,
Okay,
very much so.
and
Yes,
that's why I decided, once Robert told me, for my viewers out there, once Robert told me that he was one of the people that got to interview Ted Bundy, I'm like, there's 100+ women out there that have not gotten their story told.
right.
You
Oh,
know,
you're right, and so very much so. And so then he cannibalizes different parts of her body. I don't know. I really don't want to get into the gore, but
yeah,
it's this effect of how he raped these women with his fist. He also cut some of their vaginal area out and would take that home,
what
and
the hell?
he would eat that.
Gross,
Also, he
gross.
decapitated 12 women, 12 women. And he would say, and he said, Robert, he said, don't you ever go like hunting? And I said, no, I don't hunt for God's sake. He goes, oh yeah, I forgot you're a queer. And that was the word that they would have used back then,
Back
right?
then, right?
Yeah. So they used that word, and it didn't bother me. I said, what the hell, I've been called worse. But anyhow, and so it didn't bother me. And I said, no, I've never trophy hunted. He goes, well, when I cut their heads off, and I said, you know what? I want you to explain to me how you did this, because it is not easy to decapitate.
The spine is yeah,
It's difficult. In the very front, it's easy. It's like soft tissue and such, right? But when you get to the back, there's a lot of ligaments and other things, right? And I said, I want you to tell me how it was. He goes, well, I always sharpened my knife before I did it, and things like that. And he said that he would sometimes break their necks first and then do it. But he said he would just get a knife, and again, he wanted to see their facial expressions. He wanted to see the fear, right? And so
right.
he would slowly cutting one's throat to see the blood, and then it would go further. And these women were still alive, screaming, pleading, and stuff like that.
Wow.
And the more that they were pleading and screaming, the more blood that they exhumed, right? And stuff like that. And he said, finally, he just cut their heads off completely. And
One can only imagine what they were going through.
right. And then I said, well, what did you do with the
It's
head?
horrific.
And I said, what did you do with the head? And he said, well, they're like a trophy, so I would put them in my front seat. So he would put them in his front seat, and the rest of the body was in a black bag, some type of bag, and it was always in the back of his trunk, always. Okay. But so fascinating also is that I said, what did you do with the blood? I mean, because a lot of carnage went
Yeah,
on.
yeah,
I mean, how did you do that? He goes, well, once I killed the bitch, and again, I'm not trying to glorify what he did. This is what he's telling me. Well, once I
right,
killed the bitch, and then I would just kind of drive around. Sometimes I would go to McDonald's, get something to eat. The head would be sitting next to me. I would cover up the head when I went to the restaurant or getting some gas and such like that. And then he said that he knew that he had to get back to the location where he murdered the first woman, and then he went back to this place several times because they needed to clean up the blood. So he knew that he had to use bleach and stuff like that. And during that time, we did have luminol and such like that the police used so they could see blood that was possibly tried to being cleaned up, right?
right,
But luminol back then was not like the luminol it is like today. It was
right.
completely different. But anyhow, so he did go back and clean up. And I said, did you feel any remorse or regret? He goes, fuck no. He goes, it helped me inside of me. I felt good. I was getting back at my bitch of a mother. And I said, Ted, I said that. He said, stop. You call me Mr. Bundy, you queer. You call me Mr. Bundy. But I didn't. I didn't. I
During
continued.
any of the times that he was explaining the stuff that he was doing, was he ever looking directly at you guys, or was he kind of like spacing out, like he was reliving those events?
We were like in a semicircle. Okay, he was sitting in
Hmm.
front of us and such like that. I was sitting right in front of him. I experienced things differently than what the other psychologists. Like his eyes would get really, really dark when I was talking to him. The other psychologists never noticed that. I could see him sweat. They never noticed that. I noticed more of him twitching, sometimes his fingers, his hands and his feet moving and such like that. Um, but he was quite fascinating. Very, very fascinating. Does that answer your question?
Well, I was kind of curious of if he was like replaying the memory in his mind as he was explaining it, like he was reliving the event of the past while he was trying to explain to you all the things that he was doing or all the things that he did.
Right. It was just the fact that he knew in detail of what he did to each woman and
Hmm.
what he did to each woman. Some of them were the same thing, and other times it was different. Okay, and it was almost like he was when he was talking about it. It was like matter of fact, like I said. Also, there was sometimes this exhilaration that he was back doing that
He
again.
was getting excited about remembering.
Oh
Hmm.
yeah,
He was reliving the memory.
Yeah.
And I asked him. I said, "Did you ever penetrate? Did you ever go inside with your penis into these women?" And he said, "Only when they were almost dead,
What the hell?
because I wanted to see their face." Because he said, "Well, I never put anything on me, anything," and he said, "I just shoved my dick into them. I wanted to see their pain." And that's what
Wow.
he.
Wow. Okay. So again, for the viewers, just as an intermission and a reminder, this show is we talk about everything on this show. There are curse words, and this is pretty much an adult show. So please, if you're watching, just make sure that your children are not around and hearing distance of what we talk about, especially on tonight's show. Myself, I've been interested in documentaries of the serial killers, stuff like that, for just out of curiosity myself. And again, whenever I heard about Robert Riggy here, our guest tonight, through a mutual friend, I'm like, he interviewed Ted Bundy. I got to talk to this guy. Because I'm always interested in the psychological end of it, right? How does one snap? How does one get brought to that point of wanting to take someone else's life, whether it be male, female, or hell, even an animal? I
Right,
wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't have the balls to do something like that, no matter how mad I got. Right?
right.
I couldn't do it.
Well,
I,
there's one thing that separates us three and our brothers and sisters, if they're not serial killers who are listening to this, is the fact
Heaven
that
forbid.
yes, and again, I'm not trying to make light, but it's just the fact that we, all of us at some time have been betrayed terribly by someone. Have you ever think about this? Have you ever said to someone, "I wish I could kill you"? Think about that. Have you been so hurt, so betrayed that you had said that to someone, or you would say, "I wish you were dead"? Okay, we all have that part of us inside of us. It is. It is an instinctual part of our animalistic being because we're social animals first. We are social animals first. It is only through the mores and traditions in our culture that says, no, murdering somebody is bad. Do you see what I
very,
mean?
yeah,
Okay. But all of us can be, and that's why so many people, men and women both, and children, will be murdered in the fit of passion, in the heat of passion, as they say, right? That we let our emotions get the best
get the
of us,
better of us. Yeah,
okay?
Yeah, when that animalistic side kind of takes over the forefront of the brain, and
Yes,
all reason exits.
yeah, very much so. And also, is that when we get so angry at somebody and want to do something out of revenge because we're hurt, we stop and think first, okay? Serial killers do not stop and think, they just go with the flow. So for us, we will stop and think about, okay, it's called conscience. Okay, we have
yeah.
a conscience.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there's like the little thing, we hear something inside of us or our hearts, wherever, that, you know what, you don't need to do this. You're going to get in trouble. This is the wrong thing to do. Step back, get away from it, right?
Walk
But
away,
with
take a
serial
deep
killers,
breath.
right? And serial killers don't do that. They just kind of like go with the flow. They just kind of
So would
go in
you
this.
say it would be like they become slaves to passion in a way?
Mm, on a level,
On the
probably, yeah,
darker side of it, but
right. Well, it's just the fact that they want revenge on. Instead, he could have sat down with his mother, with Lois, and said, "Listen, I'm really upset with you." They never had this conversation. He did call her a bitch, yes, but he never went and had a detailed conversation with him. And I think that if he would have, and if she would have been honest with him, okay, of who his father was, because that always ate him until he went to the chair. Who his father was, because he looked like his grandfather. But again, it could have been just genes because his mother is his sister. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he did look like his grandfather very
And
much.
and back in that time, we didn't really have the research tools or the research ways that we have today.
or the
Right.
level of technology.
Yeah, even if they wanted to sit there and try and find out, they they could have had that conversation, like you said, between the mom and Ted Bundy, and he wouldn't have done what he did. And in my thinking, if they would have had that conversation as a kid, a child to a parent,
Right.
maybe that would have saved him from the horrific shit that he did.
Save these women.
Yeah, the
So,
women.
and so Louise, do I fault her? You know what? We all fall short. We all do things and such like that. She did not have the ego strength to do it. She didn't have the strength to sit Ted down and say, listen, your grandfather, if he is, I'm not saying that if he is, that Louise could have said, your grandfather is your father. She could have said that. Or she could have made up another story that hopefully that maybe he would have believed. But no, she never did reveal to him who his father was. And he went to the chair. He went to the chair was two things. One thing that he went to the chair was he never knew who his father was. Secondly, that he was ready to kill again. That he never got the satisfaction. Only for that time, it was like an orgasm. That during that time, in this murdering, heinous things that he did to these women, that's when he felt good about himself. Okay. But as we know, an orgasm lasts for whatever time, right?
Right.
Okay. And for him, he prolonged it because he wanted to feel good about himself. He wanted to see the fear. He wanted to have these women plead to him, "Oh, help me! Mercy. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Whatever. And but he wanted these women, unfortunately, to beg and such like that. And anyone would beg for mercy. Anyone.
Hell yeah, you would.
You
What?
would.
Hmm.
Here's a question that I wanted to ask earlier. This Ed guy that he quote got out of the way so that he can go on his Ted can go on his horrific ways, right? A little
Right.
easier. Um, do you think? I don't think any time before Ted there was any really mass murdering like that happened. Was there? Do you think it was a copycat, or do you think he idolized and wanted to do you think? You know where I'm
Well,
going with it?
yeah. Well, there was like, okay, well, just like Gary Ridgway. Gary started way before he did. Okay. And again, he wanted the best of stock, as he said. Okay. But he thought Gary Ridgway was an ass. He did not approve in what he did, which makes no sense to me whatsoever, you know. But every serial killer, there's a difference between a mass murderer and a serial killer. Totally different thing. Totally different. A serial killer is out for revenge, trying to satisfy something inside of them that is missing, that they want answers for things and such like that. They want to put upon innocent people all this pain and all this frustration, all this anger that they have, right?
Right.
And so that is what is one of the main differences between a mass murderer will just go out like they did in Las Vegas and start shooting up everybody, right? And so that does happen, right? It's
Right.
not, it's not a particular person or or a crowd of people that they may know, if it's just women or if it's men or whatever, right? And but with Ted, he wanted to his revenge, and again, the more that the women screamed out, the more he got off on it.
So it was never like a copycat thing. He
Mhm.
wanted this for his own twisted pleasure.
He did very much so, very much so. You know, and right now he loves this. He loves me talking about him. He does, and even in the grave, even in the grave, he is getting off on us talking about him. And he also said that no one will ever forget who I am. And look who we're talking about today.
Yeah. When did he pass away? I can't remember. Not too long ago.
Well, okay, Ted Bundy. Okay, so the interview was over. It was 90 minutes. I mean, you know, it was one of the most incredible interviews with anyone that I've ever had in my life. For all of us, two of the psychologists got out of the field completely because of this interview. And so just talking about it, processing it. And during that time, also, my brothers and sisters, that we knew of DNA, but the testing for DNA was shabby at best.
Yeah.
Oh, it was horrible. It was horrible. And but like I said, that he went to the grave not knowing who his father was and loved him greatly. He went to the grave. He went to the grave, not satisfying this urge that he had down deep inside of him, and he died, and his anniversary is coming up. I've always wanted to do, when I began doing podcasts and such,
Mhm.
I have always wanted to do a podcast on the day that he was executed, and that is January 24th, 1989. I was there. I had written to him thanking him and the warden and his lawyer about allowing us to come there.
So
And
you were there when they executed him. Is that what you're saying?
yes, I was.
Wow.
So years later, when they were getting closer to him executing him, I wrote to him, his lawyer, and to the warden, asking if I could be one of the people there. Okay, and Ted, and a week later, I got a, and Ted said yes. He had no problem for me being there, and also the warden said yes. There's only a certain amount of people that were going to be there, right?
Right.
And so his lawyer said that was fine. So on Sunday, January 24th, 1989, at 7 a.m., we got there at 6 a.m., and the place was crowded. It looked like a state fair, you know, there at the prison. I mean, there were people that were, kill him, kill him, kill him, Then there was also the religious side, praying for him that they would have a stay of execution and such like that. And so the state police, the state troopers in Florida, they had to separate them really big time because it was getting nasty outside.
Right.
And I remember getting there at 6 o'clock. People had been there, since midnight. And anyhow, and so we were escorted in, and some people spat on us. Some of us, it was just horrible way we experienced this going into the prison and stuff. And so anyhow, we go in there, we go into a room. It was a two-way mirror. He could not see us, but he knew that we were there. Okay, we could hear him and everything. We could see him, right? And we could hear him, right? And so when he comes in, all of his hair is just
Shave. Right.
completely shaved off. And they nicked him several times. I saw where there was blood, and I thought to myself, you know what? That's the least. That's the least that the state can do is nick you a little. You know what I mean? You know, for
Yeah.
all the for all the heinous things that you did to these women and how you cut them and dissected them
Yeah.
and decapitated them and cannibalized them. Who so who gives a rat's ass, right?
Right.
And because he would go like this, and there was blood on his hand and stuff like that. Anyhow, he sits down in the chair. There was a Methodist minister, and that's another part of his life too, about the church, of how he's so pissed off and hated the church big time. In fact, that he was very, very open to us about that when he did go to church, that he would go masturbate on the robe of the women in the choir. So he did that also. So anyhow, and so the preacher comes in, begins to, say a prayer. Ted says, "Get the fuck out of here. I don't need prayer. I already know where I'm going because I know who I am." And so the preacher leaves, and the warden says, "Do you have any last words?" And he looks at us and he says, "Always remember this." He said, "I love everyone."
Where the hell did that come from a guy like that?
No, where where did this love? Do I believe that he had any redeeming factor? Hell no,
No,
I don't.
no.
I don't. No, no way in hell. No way in hell at all. And again, my paranormal brothers and sisters, I'm not here to glorifying what he did. It's just the fact that the story of these women need to be told. I know we don't have enough time, but how I have my connection with one of the women that he murdered when I was a child, and how this young girl was raised on my road here in Peoria, Illinois, and how she went to the Pacific Northwest. Again, people were hitchhiking and such like that. And so I have that connection with her, and how she and how and what happened to her. We can go into that another time.
Oh, well, we can always have a part two to the show, in a week or so, and we would love to have you back on, Robert. We are running out of time though, um, so for the viewers out there, we appreciate you watching tonight. And this is Robert Reedy, the guest for the night on the Darkest Hour podcast. We are here well, every Friday from 8 to 9 Central. We start the show at 8, and we got to get off here right around 9 o'clock for the other shows on the network. Again, my buddy of mine up to the top right is Pyrene. His name is Andrew. And so tonight we appreciate you coming on, Robert. It was quite
It was
entertaining.
very and very
Um,
informative. A lot of
yeah,
things that a lot of people just don't know. It
yeah,
was
and
very good to pick your brain.
that's why. Oh, I'm gonna pick the hell out of your brain now, Robert.
That's and yeah,
I'm gonna pick the hell out of your brain because, like I said, I have a thing about watching the serial killer documentaries on the TV or YouTube or wherever they're gonna when
Other
they come out.
podcasts.
Yeah, I'm gonna sit there
Hmm.
and I'm glued to the TV watching them,
right,
because I want to know from the psychologist's point of view what makes their damn brain click. Why
right,
do they want to do something like that? Why would you do something like that?
right.
So that's we can always have you back if you're interested and to come back
Oh,
on the show.
very much so, because I need to talk about the pathology. I need to talk about the pathology of Jeffrey Dahmer, also of more of Ted Bundy, also of Gary Ridgway, also of Dennis Rader. Also, okay. Also for the son of Sam, who I write to. I write to all these serial killers who are still alive because I am fascinated. I am fascinated of their narcissism. It's like Scott Peterson that killed his wife Lacey, an unborn child, Hunter in California. He believes to this day, he says, "Well, Robert, I don't know why I'm sitting in prison because I didn't do it. And I wish that the authorities were looking for who murdered my wife." And even the sickest part about that is that his own brothers and sisters and his mom and dad believe that he never did it.
What the
Never,
hell?
I know. And so I have all these letters, and I continue to write to them. I know somebody has offered me buku bucks for them. They're just for me personally, stuff like that. Because again, I'm fascinated with the criminal mind. I am fascinated why people do and how they do it.
Right. Well, we
Yeah,
can
what
always
makes
have
them tick, right?
yeah. What makes them tick and why? Like I said, it always goes back to why. Why do you even want to do something stupid like that? Heinous.
Yeah, and Dennis Rader. Okay, when we talk about him, his is even fascinating. Each of them are fascinating in their own way, right? But for 20 years, he was silent. He was silent until something, which I'm not going to talk about now, kicks back in. And we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we can definitely have you back
Cliffhanger.
on, and we'll have a part two,
I love it.
either next week or the week after. So for my viewers, that's the show tonight. We need to end it. And again, Robert, we appreciate you guys coming on, and we'll look forward to talking more, Robert, for definite. And like I said, me and Andrew, we're gonna pick your brain like no tomorrow.
That's fine.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be writing down questions after we get off.
Okay, that's cool.
So for the
That's
viewers, we appreciate you guys hopping on tonight to the Darkest Hour Network, Darkest Hour podcast on Whispers from the Unknown Network every Friday, 8 Central until 9 Central p.m. So once again, Robert, stand by. We're going to go ahead and end it. And to the viewers, we again appreciate you guys coming on. And we'll be back next week, Friday at 8. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Darkest Hour podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to see more, tune in every Friday at 8 p.m. Central, right here on Whispers from the Unknown Network.